What is up, y'all? We are back with another WNBA update after a week of close matchups. And today we are talking how the Lynx will plan to work around an injured Napheesa Collier. They are at the top of the league, but what does this ankle injury mean for the Lynx moving forward? Plus, will the Connecticut Sun be in a new city by 2027? All the behind the scenes and the goings on with the Connecticut Sun to Boston potential move, plus trade deadline talk. So let's dive right in. But before we get into our four quarters and the meat and the potatoes of our show today, we will start how we always start every single show with the Fast Five storylines that you may have missed this past week in the WNBA. So let's start number one, like I mentioned it, Napheesa Collier, who is the star of the Minnesota Lynx, suffered a right ankle injury on Saturday night against the Las Vegas Aces. So this cannot be a good sign for the Lynx that rely very heavily on Napheesa Collier, and we don't call it the MVP for nothing. But can they stay at the top of their game and at the top of the NBA standings, even if Napheesa Collier needs to sit out for a few games? We'll get more into that. But we'll move on to number two. Emma Meesseman, who was just acquired by the New York Liberty, was a much-needed asset to that squad in her debut as she helped the Liberty snap their four-game losing streak as she made her debut with the team. All right, number three, Cameron Brink, a first-round pick out of Stanford just a couple of years ago, makes her return to the court for the LA Sparks after she's been out for over a year with an ACL tear. Now, it did come in a losing effort, but in the 15 minutes that she was out on the court, and of course, she's in a little bit of load management as she eases back in from injury, she looked ready and happy to be back out on the court. Number four, Sophie Cunningham launched a new podcast called Show Me Something. This is another example of WNBA players and the league itself getting more visibility, building more of a brand, and players seeking out these kinds of opportunities from their stardom off the court. So I know I will for sure, because Sophie Cunningham does not hold back and does not mince words, I will for sure be giving the podcast a listen. All right, fifth and final point, the Lynx acquired Dijonai Carrington from the Dallas Wings. We will talk all things trade deadline just a little bit later in the show. Plus, what does Dijonai Carrington add to this already loaded Lynx squad? All right, that was this week's Fast Five, everything that you may have missed this past week in the WNBA, but let's get into the conversation. I'm Caroline Fenton. She is Cassandra Negley. Let's get into our four quarters. Cass, a lot went down in the WNBA this past week. Some things we can talk about, some things we probably shouldn't talk about. But let's start with the first quarter. The Lynx have continued to stay at the top of the league standings. We saw the Lynx and the Liberty WNBA Finals rematch, the first of four matches that we're going to get from these two squads over the next couple of weeks. But in the first matchup, the Lynx got the best of the Liberty, 100-93. Napheesa Collier led the Lynx with 30 points. Sabrina Ionescu led the Liberty with 31. So the Lynx, proved a point against the Liberty. The Lynx are the number one team in the WNBA, but with that comes the looming news of Napheesa Collier's injury. She left their matchup with the Las Vegas Aces, was kind of hobbling on her right ankle. How much is Napheesa Collier's injury a concern for the Lynx and a concern to you?
It's a massive concern. She is everything that the Lynx need and want. Defensively, she became a defensive player of the year, which is exactly what Cheryl said she needed to be for the Minnesota Lynx to take the next step, which they did in reaching the finals. Offensively, Cheryl Reeve said after that Liberty game, it used to be that Fee did a lot of work inside the paint, and now she does a lot of work everywhere. She can score from everywhere, from three-point range. There's not a lot you can take away from her because she's just going to get her points in another way. When I look at the Minnesota Lynx, Cheryl has talked about wanting to bring everyone back because the chemistry of the team was repeatable. That was the success that they had. But certainly, that revolves around Fee. So going forward without her, they do have a cushion. But I'm concerned also because I felt like watching that game, Sabrina Ionescu said it herself, if there's a good loss to take, it's that one. I mean, the Liberty, without some key pieces, scored 93 points on Minnesota. I think a series looks pretty good for both sides. It's not like a runaway.
And you look at the Liberty, Brianna Stewart had an injury scare. We learned that it wasn't going to be a season-ending kind of thing, so at least you avoid that there. And then the Liberty adds Emma Miesemann. They're only getting stronger at this point in the season. Like you said, taking a loss to the number one team in the league, it's not a bad loss to take, but these two squads have 3 more matchups coming up over the next couple of weeks, the first of which coming up this weekend. We haven't heard an update, at least on Monday, August 4th, when we're recording this podcast. We haven't heard an update on Napheesa Collier. It very well could be, just based off of speculation and zero fact whatsoever, it could be just a little bit of a bump and a bruise and something that she might only miss a very short period of time, and Napheesa Collier will be right back out there on the court at 100%. Or it could be something more. We don't know at this point in the season. So it's kind of hard to evaluate exactly what this means for the Lynx, whether it's in the short-term future or the long-term future. But if we want to prepare for the worst, and hopefully we don't have to, but that's just the reality of the situation. Yeah. If the Lynx are without Napheesa Collier for an extended period of time, the now comfortable lead that they have in the WNBA standings, they're sitting at 24-5. The next best team in the league, the New York Liberty at number 2, 18-10. That's a comfortable lead, but that is one that I don't think that the Lynx can hold on to for an extended period of time if they are without who is the front runner for the MVP right now in Napheesa Collier.
Yeah, and you said it yourself. Eric Thibault spoke with reporters the morning of that game. I think Fee had mentioned it too. They knew that the next time they saw the Liberty, it wasn't going to be the same Liberty team because Emma Miesemann had just landed in New York and was getting ready to go. Emma Miesemann, by the way, who after that win over Connecticut, she was asked by reporters, what do you feel like you brought to the team to get a win? And she said, a body. Just to put into perspective what the Liberty are going through. But this is a 3-time EuroLeague MVP, was a finals MVP one of the last times she played in the W. She's going to be a huge paint presence. Alana Smith for the Lynx is a little bit undersized at center and has to go up against 6'6" Jonquel Jones and Emma Miesemann, especially with Stewart out. And if the Liberty if Fee is out for a while, right? The Lynx have to figure out how to adjust, how to work within their rotations. They've had this same starting 5 pretty much for the past 2 years. If the Liberty can win those 3 games, as you said, completely changes the standings. I think one of the most interesting things is over the past week since that game, not even a week because it's Monday, how things have changed almost by the day with just, one signing, one arrival, one injury, what have you. Like, things can change so quickly.
Well, the difference between 2 and 6 in the league right now is 2 games. It is 2 games. The Liberty it's sitting at the second place in the standings, 18-10. Atlanta Dream right behind them at 18-11. Then you have Phoenix Mercury and the Indiana Fever each sitting at 17 wins and Seattle at 16. Like that, but that's a massive difference between 2 and 6. And then if you go even further down in the standings, it's still just a game here and a game there. It is the difference of a hair in the standings. And like you said, at this point, as we approach the trade deadline, that, these moves here and there, whether it's, an acquisition or whatever you're giving up in a trade, very well could be the difference of making the postseason and not making the postseason. Now, at this point, the Lynx aren't concerned about not making the postseason. They are very comfortable atop the standings in the league. But I think that just shows kind of the mucky middle of the league and the draw that some of these teams at the top could get in the postseason. But as we mentioned, right now we don't know what the status of Napheesa Collier will be. If the Lynx are without Napheesa Collier, whether it's for a short period of time or an extended period of time, whose job will it be to pick up what they've lost in Napheesa Collier?
Well, I think you have to look at the guards to continue to have good games, and then you're going to see the development of their depth. And we're going to talk about it more later, but Dijonai Carrington coming in is certainly going to help in some ways. But to further explain the gravity of potentially playing without Fee and losing ground in the standings, like we saw last year how important home court advantage was in that 5-game series. So if we're looking at it, and I think I kind of am at this point, that the Liberty and the Lynx are on a collision course for the finals, home court advantage is so important between these two.
Oh, no doubt. 100%. It's important, across the entire league. But, championship teams figure out ways to win games even when they're dealing with injury. We've seen that year over year over year, that the injury bug inevitably bites at some point. How do you avoid it as much as possible? And how are you able to overcome it as much as possible? And bringing us to our second quarter, the Indiana Fever may just be figuring that out, because Caitlin Clark is still sidelined. She's dealing with a groin injury, but don't look now. The Indiana Fever have won 5 games in a row. And sure, those wins have been over the Wings and the Sky, who are at the bottom of the WNBA standings, but that's a 4-point victory over the Seattle Storm. That's a 6-point victory over the Phoenix Mercury and a 10-point win over the Aces in that 5-game winning streak. Are the Fever figuring out ways to win without Caitlin Clark? I don't want to say they don't need Caitlin Clark, because that would be a blasphemous statement, but are they figuring things out without Caitlin, who is kind of a timeline that's up in the air?
Yes. Simple answer, yes. I think they are figuring each other out. What impressed me most about this 5-game winning streak so far is those wins against Phoenix and Seattle. First of all, 2 squads that are kind of in that middle tier that the Fever are in the standings. And winning those games are the most important. But watching that game against Seattle, holding off the Storm run in the final minutes, closing it down with a key bucket by Kelsey Mitchell to win the game, I felt like that was a game that a month and a half ago, the Fever aren't going to win without Caitlin Clark in the lineup offensively, running the show, calming people down, getting a big bucket when you need it. I mean, this is a team that it's just, people are stepping up in different ways. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in this 5-game stretch averaging double digits. And let's mention Ari McDonald. I mean, massive pickup, continues to be just truly incredible. In the 5 games, 14 points per game. She's shooting 51%, 52% on threes, 94% from the free throw line, 5.5 assists per game running that offense in Caitlin Clark's absence.
I mean, and we saw on Friday night against the Wings, Kelsey Mitchell, double-double. Aaliyah Boston, double-double. Natasha Howard, double-double. Like, it is amazing to me to see the way that the Fever have been able to figure things out. And we talked about it on last week's show. And, of course, you can find that on the Yahoo Sports YouTube page. But there is a possibility that Caitlin Clark could be sidelined for the rest of the season. And if the Fever continue to play at this level and Caitlin Clark continues to have, an iffy injury situation, then the Fever front office might evaluate it and say, look, if it is going to help us in the long run to have 100% Caitlin Clark next season versus having a, let's say, 70% Caitlin Clark right now, well, if the team's playing like they're playing without Caitlin Clark, then we can live with having Caitlin Clark sidelined for the rest of the season. Now, of course, we don't know what the future of Caitlin Clark is going to look like. That is just pure and utter, speculation on my part. But let's say the Fever do decide to sideline Caitlin Clark and the Fever continue. Obviously, they're not going to win every single game on the rest of their schedule, but if they continue to find ways to win games and the Fever make a playoff push, now I don't think that they can win a championship without Caitlin Clark. Again, prove me wrong, because my goodness, it looks like they could be. If they make a push in the playoffs without Caitlin Clark, I think we need to start talking about Stephanie White as Coach of the Year. When the face of the league and one of the best players in this league is not contributing and you have, postseason success, I mean, absolutely that coaching staff deserves a whole lot of kudos.
And certainly the front office too. I mean, whether they, make it to the finals, whether Caitlin Clark returns or not, and I think this winning streak gives them a nice little runway to give Caitlin some unstressful room to ramp up for the postseason. But the work that the front office has done within the season of finding players to add on hardship contracts, complete, free agents who fit what they want to do, who are going to meld into their locker room, who are going to build the right kinds of chemistry that it seemed like maybe was an issue with what they did in the offseason. Ari McDonald and Chloe Bibby are just incredible fits. And you hear all the time, to bring in a player of that caliber in the regular season, to not have to pull off a trade or anything like that, to bring them in on 7-day hardship contracts and fill these pieces is incredibly impressive from everyone involved, especially the fact that we're sitting here and they're in, 5th place or whatever it is, and Caitlin Clark has barely played half the season.
I mean, they're brilliant moves that they made to capitalize on the right now and to supplement their team now without mortgaging the future. The Fever understand that they have a very, very strong foundation for their future, and Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark. And of course, you can add other role players into that as well, but that is a pretty strong foundation. So the Fever being able to do both, and in sports, that's an incredibly hard thing to do. Capitalize on the now without mortgaging the future. I think the Fever front office absolutely have done a masterful job. And then you look at the Fever schedule, and yes, of course, they have 3 matchups with the Lynx upcoming. They've got a handful of matchups with Seattle and with Phoenix, but also with all of those important matchups when you look at the standings, they also have a couple of matchups with the Chicago Sky and a couple of matchups with the Sparks, which feel like winnable games, a couple of matchups with Connecticut upcoming. If the Fever can just win the games that they are supposed to win, the games that they will be favored in, and they can pull off a couple of wins that they're probably not favored in, a couple of games that they're not going to be favored in, then I think the Fever will absolutely be in a comfortable position in the standings as we get into the postseason.
Yeah, imagine if, we just talked about things can change so quickly. Imagine if they could slide into 4th and get home court advantage, and they get Caitlin Clark back, and things, progress pretty smoothly. I think they still have an incredibly high ceiling, and we're just seeing that continuously with the way everyone else has come together to win these games.
Oh my gosh, home court advantage with Caitlin Clark coming back the first time she's coming back in the postseason. I want to be there. That's a subliminal message to all of our bosses. I would like to be there for business reasons. Of course, obviously. Not just to observe the absolute insanity and the party that's going to be going down with the Indiana Fever. All right, let's move along. But before we hit our third quarter, we got to take a little bit of a halftime break. I don't know if y'all saw this, but this was the Aces halftime over the weekend. There was a little baby crawl, and I love these sweet little, lighthearted moments, the cute little moments of, they'll have the dogs racing each other and babies racing each other. But this little girl who was racing took it to another level because she was like, I am around all of these babies that are crawling. Let me give myself an advantage and just walk to the end in the finish line. But actually, taking her very first steps. She's looking around like, I gotta help myself here somehow. Let me just get up and take my first ever steps at halftime of a WNBA game in front of an entire crowd. She was the winner, of course. I would hope so. She would be the winner in a crawling contest when she's taking steps. But
I was going to say, hold on. Moment. Wait, a question though. So this is a baby crawl contest.
She wasn't disqualified, apparently.
How is she not disqualified? This is the competitor in me, the backyard competitor. How do you walk and you're not disqualified?
Cass, I think she wasn't disqualified because they're a bunch of babies. I think that's maybe why. It's because
bring the dogs back.
It was a bunch of babies and a competition that I don't even know what the reward was, but I mean, I guess the reward is you got your baby's first steps on video in front of a crowd, and the crowd went wild. But maybe you should take it up with Kathy Engelbert. You have an issue with the integrity of the baby crawl contest.
Can I take that up with the Aces? I'll call it the Aces. Next time I'm in town, I'll ask. What's going on with that.
You should call Mark Davis, the owner of the Aces, and say, Mark, I got a bone to pick with Mark, you, and it has nothing to do
with your baby crawl contest.
Yeah, nothing to do with either of the teams that you own. I got an issue with the integrity of your baby crawling.
The way the Aces are playing right now, maybe it would be a refreshing story.
I think that it would be a very welcome discussion about babies crawling.
Exactly.
With how the Aces are playing, with how the Raiders are probably going to be playing. he would gladly take up a conversation with about babies crawling. And I hope Jason Fitz, our colleague, who is a diehard Raiders fan, did not hear my not so subtle dig at the Las Vegas Raiders there. All right, moving along into our third quarter, the latest news in the business of the WNBA, the Connecticut Sun could be on the precipice of a sale. Now, the WNBA was very quick to jump out and say the sale is not finalized, that the Connecticut Sun will still be playing in Connecticut in the 2026 season, but a potential move and sale to Boston could be on the horizon in 2027. The Celtics minority owner said that he has offered to buy the Connecticut Sun for $325 million to move the team and the franchise to Boston. Now, the Connecticut Sun played in Boston at the Garden earlier this season, sellout. And it was a wild success. There's been a lot of investment in the city of Boston into women's sports over the last couple of years, that Boston will be adding an NWSL team here as well. So your thoughts just on the move to Boston and on the way that the league has kind of responded to the news and reminded everyone like, whoa, hold up. The sale is not imminent. The sale is not finalized.
Yeah, in terms of the response, I think it's caution, certainly something they're going to discuss. To my understanding, Boston was not on the finalist list of expansion teams. Now, obviously, this move for the Sun has been talked about for a little while in terms of potentially going to Boston. That kind of made the most sense. In terms of how I feel about it, I think the pros are going to be covered pretty heavily. This is economic opportunity for the league to be in a bigger market, for players to be in a bigger market. They've spoken a lot about just small market basketball. But for me, I have a soft spot for Connecticut. It's a small town. It's a small area. You can feel the pride in the Sun around it. The Mohegan Sun tribe, when they purchased the Orlando Miracle in 2003, they relocated it to Connecticut. They were the first non-NBA owners of a WNBA team. So it was the first independently owned and operated team in the league. They said they were the first owners to turn a profit. This was an incredibly important milestone for the W at the time. I like small markets. I think they represent a large swatch of the United States that is sometimes overlooked. And I think President Jen Rosati had talked a little bit about this with reporters in terms of asking the question kind of rhetorically, have they gotten passed by? The W has graduated kind of from this minor league feel to the majors. And that's great, especially when you have players talking about having more money and having higher salaries and earning what they have earned. But certainly for the fans in a basketball hungry state, I think it hurts a little bit. And the economics of people in those areas going all the way to Boston and paying higher prices and higher parking and getting hotels and all that kind of stuff, I think it does take a little bit away from what this small town team has meant to the WNBA.
And those are kind of the growing pains, that you might lose the nostalgia and the family-like feel that a lot of these WNBA franchises have. And look, I'm born and raised in St. Louis, Missouri. So I have a very soft spot in my heart for cities that lose a professional franchise, because I was a diehard St. Louis Rams fan my entire life. Then out of greed and out of money, Stan Kroenke, the owner of the Rams, moved the team to Los Angeles. So I've been there. I felt that. I hate that. And I still have so much resentment towards Stan Kroenke for doing that. But I also do understand in this Connecticut Sun potential move to Boston that so much of it, pretty much all of it, has to do with money and marketability. The state of Connecticut is women's basketball hungry. I mean, obviously, look at who just won, the national championship in the women's Final Four. Connecticut. Gino Auriemma is a legend of the game. The head coach at UConn. That there is so much investment and love and such a large fan base for women's basketball in the state of Connecticut. It is we would be remiss to not mention, though, that the current ownership of the Connecticut Sun have just not invested into, I'm not going to say they don't have the funds available, but they have not invested the amount of money that it takes to compete in today's WNBA. Bringing the team to Boston not only brings it into an ownership group that can financially support a competitive team, the WNBA, but it also brings it into a city that has much larger notoriety. It's one of the biggest markets in America, one of the best sports markets in America. And I'm with you that I do feel for the people of Connecticut and the diehard fans of the Connecticut Sun. There's just only so much that you can do when you kind of feel like a ragtag group that's trying to keep this team afloat in a league that has just experienced seismic amounts of growth. So overall, I think it's a good thing for the league to be in Boston. The league should be represented in a sports town like Boston. But obviously, for every pro, there's a con, and a fan base and a town and a state in Connecticut losing that team is the unfortunate con of it all. Overall, though, Cass, I think it's a good thing for the finances of the league.
Yeah, for the finances of the league, like you detailed, makes absolute sense. Because also from the player perspective, it wasn't that long ago, Jonquil Jones was an MVP there, and she was talking about just not having the same sponsorship opportunities because of Connecticut. We've seen over the last couple of years, as you said, with the facilities, players want to go places where they are taken care of. And that was kind of what Jen Rosati was saying was, at one point, the Sun were the leaders in this, but now they're simply not. And, I think she had spoken about doing the right thing by the team and the players and doing what's best for the league. I did go down a little bit of a deep dive this morning because I was interested in this idea of a small market major league team. What do you think of when I say that?
A small market major league team?
Yep, any sport.
Oakland?
Oh, okay. Green Bay.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of Oakland like a smaller market that's losing its teams left and right. They lost the Raiders, now they're losing the A's. But yeah, Green Bay is the ultimate small market. The town is literally that big with a population of 11 people.
Yes, which I like. That's how I grew up. That's what I love. But I went down this deep dive because the first thing I thought of was Green Bay, the Packers, won a bunch of titles before the Super Bowl era. This was a championship team before the kind of big market NFL took off. So that helps. They won a bunch. And then the other part was, to my understanding from all this research, they built Lambeau. So they had a stadium that could hold fans and support the players. And that is the example that you just gave. The Mohegan Sun Tribe has not done that for these players. And so it does make sense that they moved to Boston, which you're right, will be a great opportunity for all of those players, for the league. It will be fun to have teams in Boston and Philadelphia coming up. I think it'll be interesting, but it will be fun.
And just the geographical proximity. Having teams in Philadelphia, having a team in Boston, and obviously New York, in Cleveland, in Detroit, just that map. Those rivalries already naturally exist in other professional leagues. Boston, New York, Philly. They're massive markets and they are rabid sports fans in those markets. So having those kind of natural, just geographical rivalries, I think will be so, so great for the sport to compound the rivalries that have kind of surpassed the college level. Like we're seeing in the WNBA Rivalry Week, we have Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese, or at least their teams facing off. We'll see if Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese will be represented in this Fever Sky matchup. But we have those college rivalries that have now extended into the W. That's wonderful for the W. But how can the W have its own natural rivalries while having these city rivalries that already exist kind of joining into the WNBA ranks? I think will be a wonderful thing. I am with you 100% that I think the league statement It's a lot of politicking, right? Because the league mentioned 9 markets that applied for a WNBA team that were not awarded a WNBA team, that they're probably doing their best to keep this relationship with these potential markets strong and to remind them that, hey, we didn't forget about you. Just because you didn't get a WNBA franchise doesn't mean that you won't ever in the future. So I think it's a whole lot of politicking, and at the end of the day, the WNBA sees the value of being in Boston, and the money, $325 million, is what the sale is valued at. That's just not the amount of money or exposure that the WNBA can pass up at this point in its growth as a league.
We'd also be remiss not to just mention the very obvious that Connecticut Sun moving 2.5 hours to Boston at least keeps it regional in terms of being the team of New England, which is probably why I would assume the Board of Governors and the people voting on this would think that moving to Boston is better than say, oh, well, just move to Houston, because New England should be represented in some way, and these fans should at least have their team nearby.
100%. It's a train right away. Hop on a train, get to the Garden, make a weekend of it. Get yourself some clam chowder. Have a jolly old time. All right, we'll move on to the fourth quarter. The trade deadline is looming on August 7th, 3 o'clock Eastern time. So we've seen the Dijonai Carrington trade. Dijonai Carrington traded to the Lynx. What do you expect to come over the next couple of days in a trade deadline, which of course I would expect some of these trades to come down at the 11th hour? Hasn't been overly active as of yet, but of course it's only Monday, so we have a few days to go. What do you expect over the next couple of days? What kind of movement, Cass?
I think the feeling is none of us know fully what to expect, and maybe teams don't even fully know what to expect. The trade deadline has historically not been popping in the WNBA. It's a hard salary cap. It's just kind of tricky a lot of times to make these moves. The biggest move was Sylvia Fowles in 2015, I think, but she had sat out with the Chicago Sky and asked for a trade. Of course, she went to the Minnesota Lynx. The other complicating part that makes it difficult right now is that, as we've said before, unless you are on a rookie contract, you are a free agent coming up this offseason because they want to capitalize on the new collective bargaining agreement. So a team making a trade is going to do so because they feel like they can add a piece who's going to be with them next year to build around, or they're adding a piece that is going to make them a title contender.
And I think we could see at least a little bit of movement. And I think what might be unique about this season is just the sheer number of injuries that we have seen. So that could add an interesting element into the trade deadline one way or another, whether it's one team that we view as a potential contender that has been bitten by the injury bug and they'll add some depth or even role players at the trade deadline, or the opposite, that a team has been so bitten by the injury bug that now they've just plummeted down the standings and have said, you know what, let's just punt for next season. We'll pick up as many pieces, whether that's picks or players, as possible at the trade deadline and pivot and look forward to next season.
One player to look at this week is Olivia Edwards. There were reports that the Mystics are looking to trade her just because they have a glut of young front court options. They've had a lot of success with their rookies this year. And Olivia Edwards is on contract through 2026, has a team option for 2027, is going to be on that kind of $80,000 salary area. So a team that's looking to keep her or build around her or add her as an asset could make a move.
Oh, I'm obsessed with these Mystics rookies. Kikiri, Finn, and Sonia Citron. Like, ever since they came to the league, they've just had the swagger about them. I'm obsessed with them. But I mentioned Dijonai Carrington to the Minnesota Lynx. I know we touched on the Napheesa Collier injury, but just looking at this trade, what do you think about the value and the move? And what do you think Dijonai Carrington brings to this already loaded squad?
Defense. She has the seatbelt moniker for her defense, obviously kind of catapulted into a national conscious with her defense on Caitlin Clark. I think for the Lynx coming out of, again, what many anticipate being a finals rematch, they allowed the New York Liberty to score 93 points on them. not great for a Lynx team that wants to hang their hat on defense. And if you look at the guards in that game, you have Sabrina Ionescu, Natasha Cloud, who is battling an illness, and she did look in warm-ups like she was battling an illness. And then Maureen Johannes, they had 57 points in that game, shooting 50% overall and 42% on threes. So I think adding Dijonai Carrington, and keeping the fee out of it, adding Dijonai Carrington is going to give them a great defensive option specifically for those matchups.
The rich getting richer. That might be the story of this year's WNBA trade deadline. Of course, again, that deadline is coming up on August 7th at 3 o'clock Eastern time. So you know that we'll have a full trade deadline breakdown on next week's edition of the show. Let's head into overtime. Cass, you have a story coming out that you can find at sports.yahoo.com. And of course, you can find it on Cass's socials as well as that story comes out in the next few days. Olivia Edwards, she is a 6'3" high school player out of Washington State. She is a 5-star. She has been one of the most pursued recruits in this class. She can dunk, Cass. Tell me everything about Olivia Edwards. I cannot wait for the story to come out.
Yeah, Olivia Edwards, she's about to start play with Overtime Select here soon. She's a personality. She's a character. She told me about her first dunk that kind of went viral, and it caught the attention of Candace Parker, Tennessee legend, and Olivia just announced her trip to Tennessee coming up. But she talked about this dunk and how at the time in 7th grade, she thought it was a dunk. I dunked the ball, and other people were saying, oh, it's kind of like a rim graze. And she said, now looking back.
For a 7th grader, like, okay, are we nitpicking?
Still impressive, right?
Right.
But now looking back that she's, had more dunks, she's like, yeah, probably right. So that's kind of where the story starts. But she is whittling down her schools. The top programs are obviously looking at her. Dawn Staley has seen her play. Kim Mulkey for LSU has gone to see her play. Candace Parker has posted her on her Instagram a few times. And it was funny. Olivia told me that people will come up to her and tell Olivia, I know you because I saw you on Candace Parker's page.
I'm just trying to think about and like putting myself in her shoes. She's 16, 17 years old. Obviously a diehard hooper. Mm-hmm. And Candace Parker is talking about her on social media. I would simply faint. Like, I don't even know how I would even control myself and conduct myself if that happened to me. So looking forward to this. Does she have a date for her announcement of where she's going to take her talents to at the next level? Well,
she is whittling down her teams this week. She's going to announce the top 6. She told us that she will probably make a decision by November. She has an idea of where she wants to go, but she wants to do her due diligence and go to all of these schools on official visits. She did tell me that no matter where she went, she feels like her game is just going to unlock even more at the next level. So one program is going to have a bright future with the number 2 prospect in the 2026 class.
And this sport has such a bright future. If we don't see it year over year at the college level, we're seeing that trickle-down effect at the high school level. So, of course, you can see Cass's breakdown on Olivia Edwards and where her future might be. You can find that sports.yahoo.com. But let's look ahead to next week in the WNBA. We've got Indiana heading to Phoenix at 10 o'clock Eastern start on August 7th. And WNBA Rivals Week starts just a couple of days after that on Saturday, August 9th. So we will see the Sky and the Fever. Maybe we'll see Angel Reese and Caitlin Clark? Question mark. Who knows? But we will see their squads face off on August 9th. That's at 8 o'clock Eastern time. And the next day, August 10th, we have got the Lynx and the Liberty, the second of 4 matchups between those squads. That is a matinee, 12:30 Eastern time tip. And also later that evening, we'll have Atlanta at Phoenix, 6 o'clock Eastern time. All of these games feature, or majority of these games rather, feature some of these teams in the mucky middle, trying to jockey their way up to the standings and be able to secure a home court advantage in the postseason. Any of those stick out to you, Cass?
New York, Minnesota, for sure.
Obviously.
For Minnesota, I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, it's 3 games in a row against the Liberty, so they can treat it kind of like a series. But for the Liberty, like, man, their schedule and their travel is absolutely brutal. So I'm not going to take too much away from it, maybe, but I am interested how this plays out.
A really interesting kind of mental litmus test to be playing the same team. And it's back and forth. It's not all in Minnesota or all in New York. You're going back and forth and traveling constantly and getting really familiar with this team. There's probably going to be a whole lot of lingering maybe tension between those two squads. So it does feel kind of like not even just a postseason series. It feels like a championship series between these two teams. So yeah, I'm with you. Anytime those two teams face off, it's going to be appointment watching for me. But we will have a full reaction to those matchups, the trade deadline, and of course, any other news and drama and all of the above that happens in the WNBA coming up next week. For Cassandra Negley, I am Caroline Fenton. Keep it locked here with Yahoo Sports.